one session or multiple people in here session with me with the camera on, so you can actually kind of see what's going on. But I left off talking about Bootstrap, which is a CSS framework, which again, CSS is a way to style the web page that you have. So if I were to just throw up HTML, which is what the bare bones would be for a website, if I just did that, then it would look horrible, like really bad. So to give some style, I mean, this isn't going to be an extravagant type of demo or anything like that, but it's going to give a little bit of style to the project that we're working with. So the finished product is going to be this. So let me pull that up really quick. So here's the full version of what we're going to build. So if I click one of these selections, these are checkboxes that I've colored to be black when I click inside of one of them, or both of them. And when one of them is clicked and I hit submit, then it will fill in this bar here. And basically, the more we click one or the other, the bar continues to fill up. So that's going to be the project for today. And also, if I hit reset, that resets both of them back to 0. So that's the project for today. To get started, we will need to grab these CSS links. So in the documentation, this is what this is. This gives you the start on where you should grab certain things for your projects. We're going to use Visual Studio Code to do some of this heavy lifting for us via a extension, and that's going to grab this link, and these two down here and put it inside of our HTML code. So let's actually do that. So first off, we'll need an index file, index.html, and we'll need 2 other folders and 2 other files. So the first will be JS, short for JavaScript, and inside of the JS folder, we'll add a main.js file, and then at the root of the project, again, not clicking anything, we'll have a CSS folder and a main.css file. These names that I'm picking are completely arbitrary. I can call them whatever I want, just as long as when I use them inside of the HTML, the main folder or main file for the project, I link them correctly. And when I say link, I mean reference them with their correct name. So I said that I was going to use Visual Studio Code to do most of the Bootstrap heavy lifting. So for usual purposes, if I was going to do a project or a website, I would have to go to Bootstrap and copy this information here. So making sure that I don't forget to copy the entire thing, I would have to drag all the way through, copy all these. And I mean, that's not a bad thing, but sometimes you want to get off the ground a little bit faster. So if I copy this and then take that to my HTML, which if I just add a line here, I could just link that like that. Which again, no problem in doing that, but most cases for development, time is mostly money. So I try and shortcut some things as much as possible. So Bootstrap and Visual Studio Code, if I hover over this little puzzle piece icon and go to there, and I search for Bootstrap, there's a snippet of information that will add this to my Visual Studio Code program so that I don't have to link this every single time. All I have to do is grab or use the command that they tell me to use. So the one I'm looking for is Bootstrap 4 CDN snippet. If I go ahead and install that, that's going to give me the ability to use some of these commands down here, specifically this one. !BCDN, which is going to create starter code for me inside of my index.html. So in order to see the power of that, I'm going to delete everything again, and then I'm going to add a ! And let me make sure I installed that. Nope. Did I? Reload. Bootstrap. Should be now. Okay, good. So installed. I have Bootstrap CDN. Cool. So I could say ! BCDN and hit enter, and it will give me all of this information here. So the Bootstrap, all the things that come or are needed for Bootstrap to work. So you'll see Twitter Bootstrap is where this is coming from. And by the way, if you didn't already know, or if you didn't know at all, Twitter is the creator of Bootstrap. So basically our code or the look and feel of our page is going to look similar in essence to the way that Bootstrap Twitter looks as well. So let's go ahead and finish off the rest of the boilerplate code. We'll say this will be Teddy versus Babyface battle. And I'm going to bring these three files up. So I'll just Control X, or if you're on a Mac and following along, Command X, and then I'll put these right before the title. So we'll have it right there. And then in the right before the ending tag, we'll have a new word called defer, which will tell my HTML that I want to wait until everything is done before you load the JavaScript. So now we need to add the custom stuff that we said we wanted, these two files, main.js and main.css. So this assets CSS style dot CSS, we technically don't need this, so I'm gonna delete it and add in my own style sheet. So CSS slash main dot CSS, and then underneath the last script tag, title, and then script colon source, and we'll say js slash main dot js. So that's the starting point for the project. From here would be just adding the actual project information that we'll need. So to get everything layered out and positioned on the page, I'll do a div. Or if you remember from the last session, a div is a place inside of our HTML code that basically is like a block or a home for a subdivision of information. I'm going to tab that over just a little bit so it's a little bit easier to read. And I'm going to add a class to this called container. This is specifically to Bootstrap. The reason why I'm using this and haven't already created code to use it is because Bootstrap itself comes with this class. Excuse me. So this class is coming from directly from Bootstrap itself. For the sake of time, I won't go too far into that. We'll actually take a little bit more time to actually dive into, or it would take more time to dive into where that all comes from. So for now, just if you're following along, go ahead and just put that in there. But it's coming from Bootstrap. Also, we'll need another div, and then we'll add a class. Again, this thing is going to come from Bootstrap as well. Most of the things that I'm going to put here right now are all going to come from Bootstrap to kind of get started. And then inside of here, we'll need one more div, and we'll say this div will have a class of call mid 4 and an offset of mid 4 as well. So we're trying to center that information that we're going to put inside this div. What's going to go inside the div is going to be a header tag, which is just going to say vote here. And we'll have some more divs, so two inside here. Div, and we'll add another class here. Class will be form dash check and space form dash check inline. That's going to create, so bring up the project again, that's going to create this, or put this in the center of the page to start. So we'll put that there, and then we will do an input, which will be of the form of a checkbox. We'll add a class here, which will be form dash check dash input, and we will add an ID to that, which will just be Teddy, and a value of vote Teddy. I'll then put a label here, which will give the checkbox a to the right side of it, like some text that it will show. And this will just be, let's do this for inline. What did I call that? Inline checkbox 1. And this will have a class of check dash label, and the information that's going to show up is going to be Teddy. So that will then become that right there. So if we were to save this and check out what we have so far, again, I'm using something called Open with Live Server. If you've never been to one of the sessions and this is your first time, first of all, welcome. And you'll want to go into, again, this puzzle piece and then hit or search for Live Server. Live Server is what you want to be looking for. And for me, it's not going to have this install button, this green install button that the rest of these have, because I already have it installed. But for you, it will probably have that. So you want to install that. And once it's done installing, it should take a couple seconds. Once it's done installing, you can join us back in the index.html. Right click and then open with Live Server. That will then open like this. So we now have everything kind of centered in the middle. Again, that's coming from Bootstrap and some of the work or the classes that were already created from Bootstrap. And we've created a checkbox with a label so far. So from our mock design, we have a few things that we need to do, but that's all going to come from our custom CSS. But we also need to have another checkbox here. So one more thing to add. Get rid of this information here. And we'll need another div underneath this one. So this is a div or block of code that we're going to use for one checkbox. Now we need another one underneath it. So we'll add another div. Again, we'll add a class, and that class will have form check space form check inline. Inside of this div, we will have again an input, which will be a checkbox. We'll have a class of form check, and that was what? Form check input. Yeah, form check input. The ID for this will be babyface, and the value will be vote babyface. The label for this, or the text that's going to go next to the checkbox, is going to say inline checkbox 2. Inline checkbox 2. And we'll have a class of form. What is that? Form check label. Robert, appreciate the share. Sarah and Gio, appreciate the share. Thanks for stopping in, by the way. And we'll make this label babyface. Give me one. Let me finish off this last bit of the HTML so it's not as choppy, and then I'll take a look at some comments, see if anybody has any questions, all that good stuff. So if we save that now and head back to the code or head back to the browser, we'll see another checkbox has appeared. So that was the goal. Let me Chris, I'm using hey Lily, what's going on? Chris, I'm using a software called OBS, Open Broadcast Software. I think that's what it stands for, and it's usually used for gamers, more or less, but you can use it for anything, any type of streaming that you want to do. But that's what I'm using, OBS. There's a bunch of other ones I know of, but OBS is probably the easiest to get started with. So, and it's free, so that's why I use it. But good. Thanks for the question, though. Appreciate it. Cool. All right, let's get back to the code. So we need a couple of buttons underneath this label or input area, which are going to go next to the check boxes. So, or one of them is going to go next to the checkbox. The other one's going to go underneath the checkbox, or the checkbox is. And that's for submitting our information and also resetting the information. So we'll need two buttons here. I'll say button and let's see, do I want to put this down? Just do it this way. Button, we'll say this is going to be a submit button, or at least it's going to have a text of submit. And the type of button that we're going to use is just going to be a plain old button. We're going to have a class to this as btn space btn primary, and that's going to make, again, that's coming from Bootstrap as well. That's going to make this a blue button in a second. And I'll add one more button, and we'll say this will be the reset button, and we'll have a type equal to button as we had before, class, and just remember to put this over here. Yeah, there we go. Might be easier to hear me now. This class will be btn dash primary. Cool. Actually, I want that to be green, so I'll say success. Cool. So if we take a look at the product that we have right now, once we blow this or blow these check boxes up a little bit, this reset button is going to drop down a little bit, but it's all stacked up together right now because of the fact that we haven't added any CSS, opposed to just the Bootstrap stuff. So halfway through this project, we have pretty much everything we need. We now just need a place to put our progress for Teddy and for Babyface. So let's add that in. That will be in a, so this will end this information, I believe. So we got our div for the first check, or for the entire column itself. Then we have a div for the first checkbox, a div for the second one. Actually, this one should be right up against that label. Let's see. I think that's what I want. Yes, that's better. Add some space there. All right, cool. So our div should have, or the checkbox divs should have input label div, input label div, and then button underneath those. So two closing divs below where we were before. So one closing div second closing div, I'm going to add some space here, and that will become a area for another div, which is, again, just to recap, that means a subdivision of my page. So I'll add a class to this div, and in that class I will say this will equal another row, and we're going to justify this to the center. Justify content MD center. That again is coming from Bootstrap, which is just going to allow me to take all my content and center it again. We're going to create another div, and that will have a, class of call mid 6 h1. We'll create a header tag. This will be the side for Teddy, so we'll say Teddy here. I'm going to add a class that I'm going to use or create that later on in my custom CSS called center, which is just going to center this text in the middle of the page. And then we're going to add a div that will hold the bar, so Teddy's bar that will fill up horizontally. So this will just do, it won't have anything like a text inside of it. That's all going to come later, specifically from JavaScript. That's going to have an ID though of bar1. Darn it. Bar1. And a class of bar. Cool. Class of bar. That ends the Teddy section. So let's do baby faces section this time or next. So we'll say class call mid 6 another h1 or another header tag, which will just say baby face inside of that. Then we'll need another class here, so we'll say class again center, so we can center the text. And then we'll add our last div that we'll need. So this one will do an ID equal to bar2. This will have a class of bar, so it's going to take some of the characteristics from the bar that we had up above, how wide it is and how it works. We're also going to add a green color to this one, so I'm going to add another style for the second bar. Okay, so if we save that and go back to the page, right now what we have is just the headers, so Teddy and Babyface, but we don't see anything here yet because we have to add that one with CSS and then make it functional with JavaScript. JavaScript is what will make this, when I click it and hit submit, that's what makes this fill up. So we need to do that next. Before I do that, let me pause for a second and see if there's any questions. I think everybody's good on those. Mr. Morales, what's going on? What's up, Lenore? What's up, Katina? Bro, what's good? All right. So, look, I'm not frozen, am I? I don't think so. Nope, I'm good. Okay. Facebook's having me frozen. I don't know why. I think I'm good. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm good. All right. Let's get back to this code. So we have the HTML filled out. We're done there. Aside for a couple of things, we have pretty much what we need to actually make this a functional project. Let's add the styles, and then we'll add the functionality to it at the end, kind of tying the bow on how all this is working. All right. So, we need to add our CSS or the style for this. So let me bring up the code again, and we'll go into main.css, and we'll add some styles here. So we'll say center will be the first one. That's going to center our text aligned at the center. We'll say our bar, and this is going to create the starting of the bar, or the bar that we have on the page is going to fill up horizontally. So we'll say height will be 3 rem units. The width will be 0%. Background will be blue, otherwise known as the background color. Border left, just to add a solid border to the outside of it, or to the left side of it specifically, to kind of symbolize where it's going to start. Will be solid 2 pixels blue. We'll add a margin to the bottom, kind of give it a bit of room to the, let's see, margin 4 pixels. And then our transition, which is going to fill that up as we add to that with a width of 1 second. So when we click that button, when we add the JavaScript to it, it's going to fill up and kind of go incrementally based on how we specify in our JavaScript. And then for the second bar, so bar green, I'm going to give that a color of green. So background will be green, and border color will also be green. We'll do or grab the inputs, so those checkboxes. So we'll say we want the inputs that have a value of checkbox to be a width of 30 pixels, height of 30 pixels, background will be white, border radius, which will make this rounder. So to start, they would be square. We want to make those round, so we'll say 5 pixels of that. And then we'll do border 2 pixels solid, and we'll make this a black color when it's filled in. I think, yeah, black, or border will be black. So that should be hashtag 555. Cool. And then we'll say when this input checkbox or type checkbox is checked, then, or when it's clicked by the button, we want that to have a background of the same color that the border is, so that will be hashtag 555. Cool. We'll say this will be a label, or we'll change our label size. So we'll say the font size is going to be 1.5 rem units, so it's gonna fill out a little bit, and the rem units are going to be a little bit more forgiving if this were to go into a smaller size. If I made the screen smaller right now, it's not going to look very pretty at all anyway, because of the fact that I'm only targeting for larger screened devices, but I could, if I wanted to, just take a little bit more time than we have. So let's go back to the browser, and we'll see that now if I hit those checkboxes, those now turn. Those checkboxes are now black. We can kind of see how or where those are going to start as well. So where the progress bars would start. So I think, oh, there's one other thing I meant to take out here. Let's see, I think it would be here. So we'll add WebKit dash appearance, and I want that to be none. So if we take a look at the mock-up of what we have, if I click that just turns black, but it doesn't have anything in it. I want that to be the same on our project as well. So in order to do that, I have to ask the browser to change its appearance to nothing showing up inside of this checkbox. So if we save that, go back to our project that we're working in and start clicking, there we go. So the look and feel, the bare bones is all there, but there is no functionality. So if I hit Teddy and hit submit, you will see that nothing actually happens. So we need to add one last skeleton bone to this, which will be JavaScript. And before I do that, let me pause for a second. And Unc, what's good? Appreciate you for stopping by. Let's see. Nope, no question. All right, cool. So we good. Let's push on to the final part of the code, which is the JavaScript portion, which is going to make this completely functional and a lot easier to work with. So a lot more fun to work with specifically. So there's going to be 3 functions that we're going to need. One is going to set the vote. So when we grab or click the button, we're going to set a percentage of that to our bar, and it's going to fill up incrementally. The second is going to actually cast the vote. And then the third is going to reset everything back to its normal nature. So let's go ahead and add that. So let's say function will be set votes. We'll need 2 things to be placed inside of here. One will be the answer ID, or the value that we need to grab information from, and then the answer percentage will be next, or PRC if for short. Then I'll create a variable called bar, which will say document.get element by ID, which is what we've been doing so far or using. We'll say ans underscore ID dot style dot width, and this is going to equal ans percentage, ans percentage plus concatenate that with the percent sign, or put all that together is what that means. So that's the end of that function. We're then going to create 2 variables called B1, which will be initialized to 0, and B2, which will also be initialized to 0. We'll create a function called vote, which will grab the information from our checkboxes and vote accordingly. But what we need to do is find out or do a check against one or the other. So we need to find out, did someone click the Teddy button or did someone click the Babyface button? And then once we have that, we'll fill up the bar based on that button click. So if the document at the given element of Teddy is checked, or otherwise means if that's true, then I want to add some information to B1. So I want to say B1 plus equals 5. That's going to add 5. So starting from 0, add 5 to that. And then we're going to take that and place that inside of our set votes function. So we'll say set votes equals bar 1, which is the ID for the document that we're looking for, or the bar that we're looking for on our HTML, and then the value is going to be B1. Otherwise, if that's not the case, or else if, as it's called in programming, the document is clicked with the element being equal to Babyface. I think that was lowercase face. If that's checked, then we'll do B2 plus equals 5. And we'll set votes to bar 2 B2. Cool. And at the end of that, once the vote has been cast, we'll make it available for someone to recast another vote. So we'll need another document dot get element by ID with Teddy dot checked. We want to turn that to false. So hard code that to false. And again, we want to make that again document get element by ID Babyface, and that will be dot checked equals false. And then the last function that we're going to need, there we go. Last function that we're going to need is the reset function. So reset B1 equals 0, or turn B1 back to 0 and turn B2 back to 0 as well. And then we're going to pass both of those values to set votes. So again, the ID that we're looking for is B1, and the value is now 0, so that will set it back to its default. So set votes bar 2 and B2. Cool. All right, so we have our JavaScript. We have JavaScript. We can click things. However, if I click this right now, it does absolutely nothing. There is a reason for that, and the reason being is because it's listening, or it's supposed to be listening for this button to, or JavaScript specifically is supposed to be listening for this button to run one of our functions, either submit or cast vote or reset. But right now it is not, so we need to tell the HTML to listen for that button click to be fired off. Once it is, then we will expand these bars that we have that are not expanding right now. So that's very simple to do. On the button, or on the buttons that we have, submit and reset, we need to add something called a on-click listener. On-click listener, which will just say on-click, and we'll say we want that on-click to listen for this vote function right here. So when that button is clicked, we will say run the vote function that came from our JavaScript. We're also going to do the same thing with the reset button as well. So we're going to say on click, and then I want that to run the reset function. So if we click those now, so if I click Teddy and hit submit, now we have the button or the bar filling up a little bit. If I hit Babyface and hit submit, we have Babyface's bar filling up as well. If I hit reset, both of those go back to the default. Also, if I hit submit, that checkbox goes back to being blank so that I can submit another or cast another vote. So if I were to cast both of these at the same time, we could just say that. Right now, because of the fact that I only am listening for the first click, it's going to go to Teddy. But we could listen for both of those at the same time. But the way this is set up is either one or the other. So I'll say Babyface, and then we'll add more to that. And again, reset, there we're done. So if you enjoy stuff like this, I'm going to be doing these weekly. If you want to see something specific to your own taste, so you have something that you're trying to work on and you want to see how it would be done custom code wise, feel free to send me a message, either here, email, you can email me at joelc@doubleedgesoftware.com. And if you want to see, again, something specific for one of these sessions, let me know, because that actually will help me to make this stuff, because I have to figure these out on my own. So I'm just kind of coming up with stuff that I feel like would be palatable, but interesting enough to keep the attention of everyone. So if that is the case, let me know. Just go ahead and send me a message. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. 4 o'clock every Wednesday, unless otherwise specified, we'll be here. So if you want to learn more about coding, feel free to drop in, and I'll catch you guys later. See ya.